Daniel, thank you for coming. How are you?
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I was looking forward to it all
I'm
day.
excited for you to be here. It gets lonely in here all by myself. I recently started a ridiculous TikTok that is SAT words of the day. So I've been in here doing these ridiculous little skits. I had a mom actually this morning who I was like, hey, do you want to do a TikTok with me? She's like, yeah, what do I have to do? I'm like, nothing, just call me and pretend, or excuse me, I'll call you. You just pretend to be a customer service rep who's like for Amazon who didn't deliver. So I'm doing these ridiculous things, but it's all me in here alone. So to have you here, God bless America.
Absolutely.
That's great.
I'm excited to be here.
You've been doing your Rocksteady stuff from your garage, yeah?
Recently, ever since COVID, I had never done online coaching before COVID, and my passion is making sure that my fighters with Parkinson's keep moving. I mean, that's really what helps slow the progression of the disease. And so what could I do? I started in a one-car garage sideways with an iPhone and a Bluetooth speaker in March, just like keeping people engaged. And then I ended up moving to a house. I got into a two-car garage. Then I made a game out of it. How can I make this as professional as possible, as inviting as possible, so that people don't get bored of the background and things? And so from there, it was getting a tripod that goes 6 feet up. I have it about in the middle of the garage. I ended up hardwiring Ethernet into my garage so there's no Wi-Fi issues. Got a TV mounted on the wall so I could see my fighters' posture, range of motion, so I can give the proper feedback in the moment.
Oh, so it's really like a two-way experience. It's not just that you are broadcasting the practice. You're literally like, hey, Jerry, straighten up a little bit. Hey, let's get those shoulders rotating a little more.
And that's I have a Jerry that's one of my fighters. So yes, and I have done that. And that's what I wanted to be able to do, is give that feedback that some people might not be able to get. They're not seeing their fighters, what they're doing at their house, or maybe they're on their computer and they're 10 feet away. You can't really see the details. So I put a flat screen TV up, and that's made a huge difference.
That's awesome.
Another thing, when I went to hardwired internet, was I could keep everyone's mics open, which is so valuable because voice projection's another thing we work on a lot. Beginning at every class, we do a get to know you question, and it can be anything from what's your favorite ice cream to anything really. What's your favorite place to travel? When COVID was, getting a little more intense, I started just going, well, what questions can I ask to help each other gain ideas? So it would be, what are something you do when you're under stress that you've learned helps you calm down? And so that right there, I've got 20 people giving each other ideas, as well as myself. And so I kind of frame questions around what the tempo is, what's going on in the world, what people are concerned about, and then I try to set the get to know you questions towards that. Sometimes I just want everyone just to laugh and have a good time. Today's get to know you question was, what's a food you've tried multiple times that you just don't like? And
oh my God, did anybody say eggplant?
Yes.
Yes, God.
So one person said eggplant, and then another fighter said, hey, I know how to make a really good eggplant if you ever want to try mine. So
God.
That's the type of interaction I have. And there's some Rocksteadies online that quit doing the get to know you for time, and I go, no, that's too valuable to take out. I don't care if it takes me 10 minutes or 20 minutes to get through it. This is part of the social aspect, and that's what we're really missing, not being in the gym. So we need to do the get to know you.
Right.
And I really encourage that with other affiliate owners.
So explain this to me. Explain the whole Rocksteady concept, because when I first saw you guys come in, and my great friend Mike Mitchell was saying, hey, this group is going to come in, they're fighters, but they're different fighters, right? And we're like, okay, man, whatever you got, right? And as we were leaving, these other, again, the Parkinson fighters started showing up, and most of them are a little bit older, and saw you setting up, and I've seen in passing kind of what you guys are doing. But the more I see, the more I'm really blown away by it. And so again, just give me a rundown of what is Rocksteady? What do you guys do, and how did you get involved with it?
Sure. I've spoke to this before, but I think it's good to repeat again on every podcast. What got me started was there was a 60 Minutes news special with Leslie Stahl. Her husband was participating in a Rocksteady. He also has Parkinson's. And so that's really what really blew Rocksteady up. They had 72 affiliates in 2015, let's just say in the United States. After that interview, since then, we have over 900 affiliates worldwide. And so that's how I first got into it. Was my father recorded the 60 minutes segments, and I think this would be up your alley. So I watched it and I go, it is. My background's in a variety of martial arts, and I think one of the biggest things, people that have invested so much time into martial arts, is making sure you don't lose those skills, but also that you can share it with other people. And so that was one thing. It's like, I was pursuing law enforcement. That wasn't working out. I graduated the Contra Costa Sheriff's Academy, was applying for a couple years, and then this came up. And so I started volunteering at the San Francisco Rocksteady. That was the closest one to the East Bay. And Kim Woolley's the owner. We're still good friends. I stay in contact with Kim Woolley out of SF Rocksteady, Freddie Silva out of Silicon Valley, San Jose, and I think he also has a San Mateo. He has 3 affiliates also. And I volunteered with Freddie for a year. I'd just go out there every Sunday, drive out there, and volunteer. And what it was the first month, there was a guy that started as a fighter when I started volunteering. I just kept my eye on him. Within the first month, his confidence was improving, his balance was improving, he's smiling more. So it's like, okay, I see this is working. And so right away it was, why isn't this in the East Bay? And so from there, I went with Kim Woolley to the Mount Diablo support group, which I'm now a part of. And I let them know, hey, I'm on the list to get certified as a coach. I'm going to bring this to the East Bay. One thing I've also noticed in the Parkinson's community is everyone's very guarded, which I understand. I know a lot of people approach their organizations and maybe they've had bad experiences. And so I just stayed consistent. That was back in 2015. I approached this Mount Diablo support group. And so from there it was, where can I find a gym that fits what I need? So I've started 4 affiliates. Originally I started one in the Concord area. I split from my partner, really from partners for integrity reasons. We just didn't align, and that's okay. The program was still good there. Within 6 months, it grew really well. And then we had already gotten Albany Rocksteady going. And so from there, I separated from the Concord location, just put all my focus on Albany. PD Active's also another support group out there for people with Parkinson's disease, and I actually have their trifold here. And I always like to read their little slogan. It's by and for people affected by Parkinson's disease in the East Bay, and their tagline here is keeping the East Bay Parkinson's community engaged, informed, and active. And so I'm one of 14 programs out there in Berkeley as well.
How many? I'm sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
But how many people are affected by Parkinson's? Because it sounds like, I mean, I would understand how people are kind of shy with addressing this, right? Mm-hmm. It seems to me that when people start suffering from particular ailments, they're not, especially things that they can somewhat control or hide or attempt to ward off, they're not really very public about it. But it sounds like there are tons of people in the area, I mean, just the East Bay, suffering from Parkinson's. Like, how prevalent is it?
Every 9 seconds, someone gets diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So I mean, you're
really?
talking, millions of people. Yeah. So it's just, luckily the Bay Area's got a lot of research and some of the best doctors in the world doing the deep brain stimulation, surgery. And so out here, we're pretty spoiled with options for things you can be doing to fight Parkinson's disease out here. And
is it essentially just a deterioration of the different neural pathways in your brain?
Yeah, it's a neurological disease. It takes your dopamine is what you're losing, and so that's where the boxing, the forced intense exercise, slows the progression of the disease through naturally building your dopamine levels. I've seen some studies that by the time you get diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, you've already lost 50% of your dopamine by the time you're diagnosed.
Okay, so as your dopamine goes, you have to figure out ways to just jack it up, to get like an unusual rise. And as you get that unusual rise, it stops the slide downhill.
Yes. Yeah.
That's bonkers. And so they do that through boxing. I mean, yes. Obviously non-contact, they're not slugging each other, but they figure out ways to essentially activate their body and get it going and get the dopamine back up without using drugs. I presume there's some kind of pharmaceutical therapy as well.
Yeah, there's there's things that also create dopamine through the medications. And so there's on and off times with the medications. And that's another thing that people with Parkinson's need to be aware of. There's going to be the downtime where you're just feeling really tired, and that's a big part of it. When you have lack of dopamine, you're just going to be a lot more exhausted easily. There's
lethargic
people,
and whatnot.
Yeah, people will do my class at the Danville Rocksteady, and they'll give me feedback of I went home and took a 2-hour nap, and it's like that's part of it. That's just the reality with Parkinson's. You're going to be tired more often, and that's why it's so important to keep moving, so that you're not so sluggish. You don't get the stiffness, the rigidity as much.
Has Parkinson's been increasing then as we have led more sedentary lives? And because it seems like it would go hand in hand with the way people are spending more time on their computers. The vast majority of people are not in manual labor professions, especially in the East Bay, right? I mean, you have people that are in marketing and all the different tech companies and whatnot. Is there any correlation with a more sedentary lifestyle and onset of Parkinson's, or is it essentially pretty much anyone, no matter what you're doing, can start having this experience?
Yeah, Parkinson's doesn't really discriminate, but I do think just in general moving more will help. But it could also be hereditary, so it's sometimes just the luck of the draw. I do know it affects people that are high functioning, which is really interesting. I'm not sure what the correlation there is, but I work with lots of lawyers, doctors, nurses, first responders. Like everyone's very intelligent. So that's something that's kind of unique to it. Other aspects play factors, chemicals, like golf courses. That's been something that's been talked about a lot as also being a contributor to Parkinson's. So it's a lot of elements. I really couldn't pinpoint exactly what.
Sure, and I'm sure there are people way smarter than you are. Figuring this out.
Absolutely.
So why did your dad think this would be right up your alley? Like, look, I love martial arts.
Sure.
I love helping people.
Yeah.
I would never think, nor would my dad see something on 60 Minutes and be like, Matt, this is you, baby. This is you. It's all you. Like, what was that? Like,
my dad knows my personality. I'm a passionate person. And once I find something I'm into, I'll jump all in. And so I think he just saw that as like, that might fit with your personality, is you have the martial arts, you like to be, always been passionate about health and fitness, and you always wanted to help people. So he knew that about my personality, and that was like my whole thing with law enforcement. Was like, I wanted to help out, I wanted to be of service to the community. So then it was, this is perfect fit for me. I can be of service to the Parkinson's community. And I really like to empower people. I never want people to feel like victims. And I felt like that was instilled in the academy as well. And so that's what I like to take moving with my fighters, is that you got this disease. It's nobody wants to get diagnosed with this, but we have it. So how can we adapt and overcome it and live the best quality of life possible? So that was right up my alley. And I think my father knew that. This works with your personality. And he's always said my whole life, do something you're passionate about. And I really felt, as being a father of 2 young kids, was I need to be a leader for them. They need to know Dad's doing something he's passionate about, because I want to encourage and motivate them to really go after something they're passionate about. I've talked to lots of friends that go, my parents never asked me that, because it was just always instilled in me. I just thought that was something everyone was told. And it's like, no, not at all.
But the concept that you should go after passionate pursuits.
Go after passionate pursuits.
That's look, everybody wants that for their kids, though. But the vast majority of people don't do that, right? Like, so what you're saying is, what I'm emphasizing is, it is actually kind of unique for you to have that perspective, because very, very frequently, right? So you have somebody who's working and they're like, look, I'm working really hard in this crappy job so that, my kid can have the opportunity to do something awesome. And then the kid comes along and, has his life, and it's kind of like cats in the cradle, right? So then all of a sudden the kid starts doing some crappy job so that his kids can have something that they're passionate about. But at almost no point do the people involved in this just stop dead and say, all right, I'm just going to do what I'm into, dead stop. I had my rowing coach, one of my rowing coaches, this guy Steve Gladstone. He amazing. He's in his late 70s, I believe. But he told me when I was in college that his dad gave him all kinds of crap his whole life for being a rowing coach. And it was funny because Steve Gladstone is incredibly decorated as a rowing coach. And I think he was it was like the 84 or the 88 Olympic commentator for rowing for the U.S. and is incredibly successful. He was the most winning coach in U.S. history. But as he started out, even when he had successes, even when the boats he was coaching in his 20s started winning championships, his dad was just like, God, you will do anything to avoid making money, won't you? And he told me this, and he has this real guttural voice. He was like, I thought about that for a long time. And you know what, Matt? This is the thing. It's like, what's the thing, coach? He's like, I will take the money if coaching pays me, but I will also coach without the money. It's not that I was avoiding money. I just wanted to do it like this. And it's funny because he crushes now. Like, he has no financial worries at all. And at one point when I was when I was rowing at Cal, he was actually the athletic director in tandem while being this championship rowing coach. So he's just fine. But the irony is that his dad was so hard on him for not chasing the money, but Steve ultimately was financially completely fine because he pursued the thing he was passionate about. He was in his 50s and just crushing. I mean, you can look up how much money he made. But I think it's such a disservice for people to try to convey to their kids that financial stability and passion are mutually exclusive. It's something that I went through as well when I told my parents, hey, I want to be a teacher, I want to be a tutor, this is really my passion. They're like, well, kiss owning a home goodbye, that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And I understand where they were coming from, but again, I think it's such a nearsighted thing. It's like, well, what if I'm the best tutor ever? Do you think the best tutor ever will not be able to own a home and raise kids in an okay neighborhood? It's like, it's such a short-sighted thing. It's like, have a little creativity, son.
Yes. I totally can relate to that. I think it's important for parents to challenge their kids. I worked at my family business for 12 years, and that wasn't what I was passionate about. It was challenging, and that's where it was just right in my face of, you're not passionate about this. Like, you're not happy doing this. I see 12 years is a long time. So you see the repetition, and I'm like, this isn't what I want for another 10 years. And so it was just really, it just weighed on my heart is you need to really go after something you're passionate about, find it, and you just have to make that jump. I took a couple notes, kind of speaking about what we're talking about. Jim Carrey, and I'm sure you've heard some of these.
Yeah, Jim Carrey's great.
And he really motivates me. And so whenever if I'm having a tough day in the past, or even now, I'll hop on YouTube and just look up motivational videos because it changes my mindset. And so some of the quotes I put down from one of his presentations at a graduation, I don't know if it was a college or high school, but this just really related to my mindset. He says, so many people choose a path out of fear disguised as practicality. And I think that's so true. And that really just struck me. I'm like, that's true. A lot of people just do things to be safe. Oh, I'll be able to provide for my family this way. And that's not what I wanted. And that's, he speaks about his father as the example of, my father could have been a great comedian, but he didn't believe that was possible for him. So he made the conservative choice. He got a safe job as an accountant. He ended up getting let go from that safe job. So that really struck me.
The irony of the safety that you get let go from.
And so that's what really kept me motivated, was I could take a safe job, but then I could get let go.
Right, and they're supposed to essentially, classically you give up financial compensation for safety.
Yes.
But then you find out that safety's a ruse anyway. Like, it's not real. Nobody really has a guaranteed job, but people think of it that way. They think of it that way all the time. And then they end up losing this job, and they're so kind of disillusioned. Like, what happened? This was my thing. And Jim Carrey, actually, I remember as a younger person, Jim Carrey was big when I was, from 10 to 20.
Yeah.
And now he's big for other reasons, but he was doing Ace Ventura, he was doing The Mask, Mask 1, Mask 2. He came out in that Batman movie when he was the Riddler, which was awesome. Mm-hmm. But he had this great interview that I remember, and he was talking about growing up being really, really upset, just angry. And he was working with his family in a janitorial service at the time. He was just scrubbing urinals late night. And he'd made this great decision that he was going to make something of himself, and he would spend time making faces in the mirrors and like adjusting his, essentially training to be this comedian. Why, I have no idea, but he was like 15, 16, and he'd spend time making himself laugh with his faces. And you see these incredible expressions through, Ace Ventura and whatnot, when that was really his jam. But he wrote himself a $10 million check, and he carried it around in his wallet, which was so incredible. And then he got, I think it was Mask 2, when he signed, and the producer sent him a check for $10 million, and he said that the person put a smiley face on it next to the signature, and he cashed it, and then he cashed his own check for himself, because it was this recognition that he had followed this thing, and it had been greatly rewarding. But the reward was not that it was the money. The reward was that he followed his thing, he followed his passion, he followed what he knew to be his skill, and he was okay. And
Absolutely.
It was such a beautiful thing. I was a teenager when I saw that. I still remember it, obviously, very vividly. It was such a cool realization to be like, God, you can really do that.
Yeah, I found that really cool that you knew about a lot of his stuff too, because like that's the other quote I want to get out there, because I think it's really motivating for young people too, is from Jim Carrey. One lesson was, you can fail at what you don't want, you might as well take a chance on doing what you love. And it's like, that's always resonated with me.
Yes.
And it's just always weighed on my heart, is you better do it or you're going to regret life. And that's another thing, is I don't want to be in my 70s and 80s going, I wish I would have tried that.
Sure.
And so that's just been the big thing, is adapting too. It's like things, life's always waves, and it's, if you can get good about being calm in the hard times, you'll appreciate the good times more. And so that was always my thing, is when it's hard, I'm just going to think, I'm going to breathe, I'm going to figure it out, so that when it's good, it's really good. And so that's just another like personal mantra of mine.
That's beautiful. Did you ever see? So Jim Carrey has obviously reinvented himself, which is amazing. I mean, he's this tremendous artist, which is not surprising. I mean, the man obviously has a different wavelength going on in his head. So to see that he came to artistry in the physical form instead of just theater, right? He did a great short movie called I Need Color, and it's not a film, but you should check it out. It's great. And in that little short, he talks about, you see him initially doing these paintings. He's got these massive canvases all around, and he can't stop himself. Like, he's literally just ravenously drawing, trying to get whatever's in his head out. But one of the beautiful lines in that is when he's talking about trying to mix a color, which I never actually thought about before I really saw this. I'm like, oh, you obviously make your own colors, because he has these base colors, and he's trying to get this blue just right, and he's like, it's not right, it's not what I want, and you have no idea what he's looking for, because to me, the layperson, the wall is just covered in all these colors, but to him there's this very specific expression that he's trying to get out. And the beautiful part of that is, he admits, he's like, sometimes I'm trying to mix a color and I can't get it right. But then I realize the color I've made is so awesome. So I don't care. And it that kind of sprung up when you were just mentioning, it's like, you can fail at the things you hate. You might as well fail at things you like and you enjoy. And in that kind of sense, he's trying to do these things and then just lets go. And he's like, why am I so upset about any of this? He's like, I'm here doing what I'm happy doing anyway. Like, say I love painting. I'm failing getting this color, but like, it doesn't matter, because it's not a fail, because I like painting and I got this other color and it's great. He's just a really interesting guy. He's gone next level.
And I think it's so important for kids to think that way. I grew up in a pretty conservative house, and so in ways I felt like I wasn't as creative because I wasn't around a lot of creative people. And so that's where, like, for me, the martial arts, it made me be creative.
Yes.
It put me around people that think differently. And that's really what I like to encourage people, is hang out with people that aren't always like you, because that's how you can learn and how other people think. I mean, there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, you need that. I've been more and more terrified recently. I spoke with Leslie Smith a week or two ago about MMA fighting, and I'm really worried as I get older of being stuck in an echo chamber. And there's no place where I'm more worried about it than in jiu-jitsu. Because if you just hang out with people that do the same thing, I know for sure now, at the very least in this medium, if I only hang out and train with people that do the same thing and say I think I'm really good in this little tiny pond, I actually risk really severe injury and at the very least defeat when I go and fight somebody with competence that expose themselves to variety.
Yes.
And I feel like that's so evident in the intellectual world as well. It's everywhere. I'm in the middle of these. Somehow I'm in the middle of these conversations regarding, the school board and reopening schools, and to see people just stuck in their ways and only looking at things one way and surrounding themselves. They'll block anyone who disagrees with them on, like Facebook or something. So they'll block you so you can't talk. They'll make very specific groups or pages where only a certain group of people can go, and they're all like-minded. It's like you're literally just reducing your ability to discuss these things, because if you're not exposing yourself in good faith to varying points of view, or points of view that you're most concerned about, and trying to really take them in and understand, you're going to get crushed in a real conversation. And I offer to almost all of the people that seem very passionate about it, I'm like, hey, if you are very passionate on either side, come jump on the mic with me and let's talk about it.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of them say no, because they don't want to actually get away from the keyboard. They don't want to come out into the world and have a human-to-human interaction and expose themselves where they can't revise their answer. They can't hit delete. They can't craft this, very intense reply. They actually have to talk at length on the spot. And that's terrifying to people because they haven't done the work.
Absolutely. And what that makes me think of right away is control. People like to be in control, which is exhausting. The more you try not to control, the easier and better life flows. And that's just something I think we figure out over time if we're investigating that. And so that's always been my thing, is when I was in my mid-20s, you're trying to control everything, and it's just draining. And then you get into, like, I'm in my 30s now, and it's like, no, quit trying to control everything. Let things play out. And life's just way more beautiful that way. When you just take a step back, you just still pursue things that you want, but don't try to control every element of it. Things can come around naturally, and sometimes even better when you stop trying to control things.
If I may pry, what tipped the scale for you? This is a personal pursuit of mine, and my wife for sure, especially with our kids. And what triggered that shift?
Sure. Honestly, I will tell you, it was going through a divorce. Dealing with having 2 kids, going to court systems and all that, and just realizing you got to do stuff you're passionate about. You got to stop worrying about things you can't control. And I'd say going through that system, family law and all that, it makes you, when people get into these situations, a lot of it's emotionally based. And so even in those moments, you have to, no matter how much emotion's involved, you have to take a step back. And that's not something I learned right away in the process. It's something I learned 6-9 months in. And my dad said something to me that really I took to heart. He said, you need to learn things in 6 months that people have 5 years to learn. And so I really took that to heart, and I go, he's right. And so then it was just, how can I better myself and surround myself with the right people that are going to be uplifting and not holding me back? And so that was where I had to get a lot more decisive. I worked with lots of mentors, because that's another thing I've learned is you don't grow hanging around people just your age. You need to be listening to people that have more life experience. So for me, it was just surrounding myself with mentors and just being decisive. There's going to come a point where some mentors, they've ran their course sometimes. So you got to be aware of that too. Sticking around with people for a certain amount of time, then moving forward. That's just because you've grown. You've had some growth. That's not a bad thing. That's a positive thing. And so I think that really set me on fire. And that's kind of what got me started volunteering. Was I was used to having my daughter 7 days a week, and my ex was a nurse, and so she would work the weekends a lot. So I was one-on-one with my daughter all the time. And then when we got through, into the divorce, I didn't see her as much. And so it was, what could I do so I'm not sitting around pouting about my life situations? Go volunteer, be of service. That gave me so much peace, and that's really what gravitated me towards the Rocksteady. Was I love doing this. This gets me out of my life problems. And so that was really, in a sense, a protection at the time. Was no matter how much my head would spin, and Freddie saw me sometimes. I'd show up on a Sunday. You could tell something was going on.
Sure.
But he's like, hey, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Because it's like I knew right then this is the best thing I can be doing for myself, was helping someone else to get me out of my own stresses of my life.
Yeah, but Daniel, that's so damn cliche. Everybody hears that. Like, you know what? You want to know one of my issues? It's, I know these things.
Sure.
And when I do it, like you're emphasizing, you got to surround yourself with good people. You got to do things you're passionate about. You got to focus on other people. It's so good, right? Like the experience when you actually do that, you cut out people that just drain you. Mm-hmm. Or if you can't cut them out, you just let it go.
Yeah.
You stop. You're like, look, I'm in it to win it with you. I can't get rid of you. You know, say you have like, it's very rare that I have a student that pushes my buttons, but occasionally I do. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to drop them because they push my buttons. They're like 16, right?
Yeah.
It's like, look, 16-year-olds are supposed to push your buttons. And sometimes it's like, look, just let it go. Don't be bothered. Just make sure the kid's not bothering other students. But like, you don't have to be bothered by it. Like sometimes there are kids in here that they make a point out of not laughing because you can tell there's just those like counter people that are just, it's not funny. And like, I'm not telling you every joke I make is funny, but sometimes I realize they're doing it just to be that person. It's like, I'm just trying to have a good time with you guys. And, you know, like, anyway, so you got to let it go. So the people you're stuck with, you gotta just let it go. But then the other people that you surround yourself with, when you do it right, it's so expansive. And then when you do things for other people, you allow yourself to let go of your own dumb little things that you're fighting, you know, over the person who made some snide remark, you know, at the coffee shop or, well, that usually doesn't happen. People in person are very nice, but it's like people online are terrible.
Yeah.
Just whatever it may be. It's almost like it's so good, you fight against it. It's almost like it's so perfect. You're like, this is it. And you're like, yeah, but this can't be real life. It was like, it'd be like eating strawberry ice cream for breakfast every day. You're like, this is so good. It's obviously bad for me. You know, and how did you experience that yourself? And if you did, how did you get over it? Because you get so comfortable in a little rut. I remember I had dated somebody in college and dated her for a couple years, and my life was in this rut. And when I finally we broke up and I was all upset about it. Then I met my now wife, and it was like, I was so distrustful of it because it was so easy and we had so much fun and we could just go and drink coffee and talk trash for like 5 hours watching cars go by. It's like, okay, this is all nice, but it's not like real because it's not supposed to be like this.
Yes.
Did you have that in like a life scale?
Yes. I've experienced that in relationships. I didn't date anyone after I was going through the divorce for a year because I was like, I'm the type of person, if, you know, it takes two people to make or break a relationship. So I take my ownership of where I was wrong. And so I took that year and just worked on myself with mentors, therapists. And then from there it was, I had such a, how do I say this? I was brought up by a great mom, but super forgiving of everyone. And so when I got into relationships, I didn't know what red flags were because I was always so forgiving. And so really what I developed was just putting lines in the sand, developing what red flags are. And so I had experienced that in relationships where you realize this isn't going down the right road and you have to just take a step back and get uncomfortable. One of my things is you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I know that's not like rocket science, but once you do, then it makes those situations easier to deal with. And so like even in past relationships, I would say like, this isn't working. I'm going to give this some time. This is why I feel like it's not working. And then that was me psychologically drawing a line in the sand saying, I've addressed it. It hasn't changed. I have to move on for myself because it's becoming, I have to protect myself mentally, physically, so that I can be a good person for my fighters. Because that's always the thing for me is, I don't care how bad your day is, I'm dealing with people that have Parkinson's disease. I'm not coming in there with any negative energy, no matter what just happened to me. And so that was something I had to develop through life. And that was just something I just keep taking on. And I've managed to do that. A big part of being a successful coach or teacher, instructor, is taking care of yourself mentally and physically. And so being aware of when you're starting to get wound up, where that student that is not laughing or just
staring, giving you the stank eye.
Yeah. Some people just like to poke. And it doesn't matter how patient you are. Eventually, if you get poked 1,000 times, you're eventually going to get annoyed.
Right.
So that's when you just have to... I've worked on myself, developing skills to know when I'm at those points. And then I just go on a little vacation, get a deep tissue massage, go work out. There's always something I can be doing to get myself out of that. But I need to do it before I, in a sense, explode.
Right.
Or do something stupid.
Right, before it becomes worse, right?
Yeah, so I think really what we're talking about is just paying attention to life experiences. If you didn't like how it felt, don't repeat it. A lot of people want to repeat things thinking it's going to get better, and it's like, no, it's not. If this relationship's not working, don't keep trying to stay in it if you've already tried. And so that's just been some of my experiences.
But nobody knows. Everybody says they want better, but I don't think people are aware of their tastes. Like, especially in younger years, right? Yeah. Like, you grow up with in a dysfunctional family or something, right? You don't know the depths of that dysfunction until you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s, and then you're like, oh, that was bad, But as a 20-year-old, let's say, and you're dating somebody, you don't know that you're reproducing the dysfunction because you're not aware. You don't have a sensitivity or a palate for it yet, right? Like, you're just in a relationship, and that's kind of it. I feel like people, it's so comforting to be around the anxiety or the emotional state that you were always in.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you were always a little anxious at home,
sure,
it's comforting to have that little anxiety in your life, that little anxious blanket over your shoulders.
Codependency is kind of where we're going. Everyone's got a form of codependency. It's being aware of it. And so that was one thing I had worked on, was understanding that. I mean, there's people that come home, which I've seen, where they come home from their job, they have to get everyone else bothered in the household before it calms them down.
Oh my God.
And so that was something I had to become aware of. And,
oh my gosh.
And that's a codependency. If this person needs to get everyone else upset so that they can calm down. Well, that's not the type of household I want to live in.
Right.
And so I need to be aware of why that is, and then to address that so that doesn't happen in, say, my home. Even myself, if I'm going to come home and I'm a little spun up, I need to be aware of that so I don't bring that negative energy in. I was working with my daughter the other weekend. She was all upset about not being able to go to a birthday party. We're in we have two homes. My ex-wife has her home. I have my home. So sometimes she's not going to be able to go to the birthday party because it was my weekend. And so she was all upset. And instead of taking her in the house with everyone and disrupting the whole house, I said, Carly, we're going to go on a walk. I'm taking her out of that equation, going on a 15, 20-minute walk, talking to her. She's only 7, but saying, hey, we need to do things like this so we don't disrupt your brother and my girlfriend. So that you can calm down, we can talk, and then we'll go home. It's doing things like that so that you're protecting your home, because that should be the place of peace, not stress.
Right. And then you start developing the pattern in the house of having a calm household.
Yes.
It's like, look, we don't bring this in here. And then it doesn't become the trigger where, say you lived in an anxious household, people reproduce that dysfunction and that anxiety and that stress. But then your house is like, no, remember, this is the calm house. They're like, oh, yeah, no, we're good here. We're good, no problem.
Yeah.
God, good for you. What an incredible transition that must have been, already having kids. I mean, I personally struggle sometimes thinking it's too good. Right?
And I know, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we kind of were going down that road. Yeah, I've had those feelings too. Probably about 2 years ago, where it's like I was starting to work into this more of a full-time role, because I had to work out on my other job to be able to support myself through this business. And that took about 2.5 years. And there was that point where you're like, I tell my fighters, I said, honestly, like, I feel like I'm getting away with something being able to do this. I'm so thankful I get to do this, because that was kind of me trying to think through is this is so enjoyable for me. Someone's going to come over and take it away from me because I enjoy it so much. I think part of it is just getting the experience and time under your belt of realizing, no, it's okay to be happy. It's okay to do things you're passionate about. But I totally understand that. I've seen posts on Facebook about that where it's like, oh, life's going too good. What's about to happen?
Yeah, right.
And it's like, that's what the mindset I don't want to have, is what's going to happen, because then you're always on edge. Even though you're doing what you enjoy, you're on edge. And it's like, that's not how I want to live. My whole thing is, the older I get, the more at peace I want to be, because I've experienced struggles throughout life where, okay, I've addressed this, I can get through this, I had this past experience that was really hard, now I can move forward because I have those experiences I can reflect on, so that when I am 50, everything will roll off my shoulder, I hope, for the most part.
God, that would be great.
That's what I keep going for. Because I've had coworkers that were in their 50s and they get wound up like nothing, and I'm like, that's the last thing I want. It's like I was experiencing that in my early 20s, and it's like, no, in 30 years I want to not ever be anxious like that or freak out if something happens. So that's just kind of like something personally I always try to work on, is kind of not being so paranoid and being okay that things work out. I think part of it is we're conditioned growing up of thinking things aren't supposed to work out. And I don't know if that's the environment some of us are in, but that's not the case if you decide to put yourself out there and take a chance. And I guess a lot of this does sound cliche, but it's important to say it for the repetition of people listening, knowing, no, you have to keep trying. And yeah, it's just too valuable not to. This is your life. I mean, that tombstone, is that another cliche, is that line between, your date birth to when you die, that's your life. It's a short little line.
Yeah, right.
And if you think of your life that way, then you'll take more chances, because that little line, it's like, that's it. So I want to make the most of my line while I'm here and do things I enjoy. Because I learned in my 20s, if you just stress out all the time, it doesn't magically bring you happiness and success. It does the opposite. It just builds up cortisol, just everything. It really drags you down.
Right.
So you can't think that way.
What about anxiety or the whole mentality? It's like, things are going all right, something bad must be around the corner. What of that level of thought or underlying kind of philosophy as an advantage over other people? In that, okay, so you're a small business owner, I'm a small business owner, right? So to assume, okay, things are going fine and they'll just keep going fine. I have to assume you have had experiences where you thought ahead, right? You want to think ahead. You want to find the holes in the ship. You want to patch those as fast as you can before they become a real big problem or a drain. And I was in my early 20s grinding through with tutoring, and obviously we had the financial crisis and all of these other things happened. But I very much started valuing my capacity to look ahead and identify problems ahead of time and work through those. Because again, as somebody who's self-employed, I've never had a boss. I never had an HR department. I never had anything like that. So I always had to come up with these, think down the road, figure out solutions, come up with the solutions, come up with the different systems to make sure everybody got the best service they wanted. But it did allow me to better my little tutoring practice. Mm-hmm. Having that anxiety and worrying, it's like, okay, things are good, but there's something that needs to get done. Maybe you don't know this second, but you better think about it and figure it out. What needs to be done, or what's an issue? What should you head off? Who should you email? Like, what parent do you want to check in with just one more time, just to make sure they're happy with everything going on? That, I think, has some value to it.
Yes.
But how do we turn that off in life? Because that's the capacity to have foresight is tremendous, but it comes with this burden where it's like, it's good, but it's going to be bad. What's going to be bad? How can I stop the bad?
Yeah, there's good stress and bad stress. I think we all need some, in a sense, a healthy stress, if you want to put it in those terms, for business, to develop that mindset to be thinking forward. I don't think we're, growing up, taught to think that way. I think if you're around someone that was a small business owner or an owner, you're around it more. But if you're not around that, you don't develop that till later in life. And so that's just, and you have to make it, for me, I have to make a game out of things so I enjoy it. And so for me, it's just making a game out of things. So it's not work, it's just a game. Because if it's work, then I'll resent it and not want to do it.
Sure.
So that's kind of the other way I have to think is how does my mind work? What do I like to do? When you start to get, more of the negative stress, what do I know? I always go back to basics. I think, people always talk about basics, and I think there needs to be more emphasis on basics. The basics are the most important. So when things get really hard, say going through a divorce, what do I know I need to do? I need to go to the gym. Even though I can't control everything that's going on, I know going to the gym and working out is going to build up naturally good hormones to help me think more clearly. And so it's really, for me, I always say go back to the basics. The word that always gives me peace is adapting. I've spoke about that before, but adapting is just what you have to do. The world's always going to change. Who would have thought 6 months ago I'd be teaching out of my garage?
Right.
5-6 days a week. But you have to adapt, and either you adapt or you don't succeed, in a sense, is how I look at it. I had a friend say to me when COVID hit, he's like, well, it's not going to last. And in my head, I'm like, well, thanks for the motivation. That's another thing I've learned is anyone that throws negativity at you, it's because they probably haven't been able to do it on their own, so they just think you can't do it. And so I had to learn, because if there was a period where I was around a lot more negativity, was I'm using the negativity as energy. Because if not, it's just like someone punching me in the gut every single day. But if I take that away and flip my mindset, I'll use it as energy. And that was the difference. That's when I was able to change my mindset and go, oh, thank you. Whenever anyone would give me doubt, thank you.
Right.
And that was the difference. It had to be my mindset changing. I can't control people, places, or things. I can control my choices. I can control how I think. I can't control if my daughter or son's having a bad day and they just want to have a bad attitude. I can't control that, but I can control how I respond to it and how I talk to them about it. Same thing with fighters, Parkinson's, or anyone. Sure. Everyone comes in with different emotions, and that's just, I go back to those basics. I can control my attitude. I can't control what someone's going to bring in. I can't control what a spouse is going to bring in. So it's just, that's the reality. It's letting go of trying to control everything. Life's a lot more at peace that way.
Yeah, the first guy. So I did have a boss when I was going to Cal, and I was a tutor at Berkeley. So I tutored the other Berkeley students, and my boss at the time, who I think is still there, the first time I heard about private tutoring, because I didn't grow up getting tutors, and I grew up in Concord. It's not like we had tutors ever. I didn't even know it was a thing. So he said, after I'd worked in the tutoring center and loved tutoring and everything, he said, sometimes we get requests for outside tutoring. It's like, you mean not in the tutoring center? You mean like meet him at the coffee shop? Like, what do you mean outside tutoring? They're like, no, somebody whose kid's in whatever and wants to needs help with geometry. I'm like, I can help geometry. They're like, yeah, you get paid, like $40 an hour. I'm like, oh my God, where are these people? And that was his thing. It's like, they exist, but there aren't many of them. So you're not going to be able to really make a living out of tutoring privately. And I was like, oh, damn, that sounded awesome. It's so humorous because the week I graduated from college, I got my first tutoring client. And then within 2 weeks, I got another tutoring client. And I did a good enough job. They liked the service. They started referring me to friends. And a lot of these people I worked for years and years. And they referred tons and tons of people to me. And it was kind of like, it's exactly what you're saying. This guy, my boss, he was not a bad person. No. He just saw limitations in his life, and he really wanted everyone else to believe in the same limitation. It wasn't even like, you know what, Matt? I don't think you can do it, but I think you should try. And if I can help you in any way, be a reference, be anything, you let me know. And I'll throw every single private person that calls your way. No problem. It wasn't that attitude. It was like, you can't do this. I'm like, really? You can't? I'm like, $40? And he was like, you can't do it. It's just not a thing. I was like, okay, man. It's such a bummer to see people doing that because it's all about you see deeply kind of like their hang-ups. And you're like, oh, don't have that hang-up. He actually got really frustrated, I found out years later, because, I would tutor for him for, I think, like a year and a half or 2 years or something. And then I went out and started tutoring privately, and then I made, my little tutoring practice. And that's it. That's still what I do to this day. And I found out a couple years after I had done it that, and I was successful doing it and making a living and moving on with my life, that he was really, really bothered because he felt like I had like robbed him. Like he had given me this knowledge about how to tutor. It's not like I got a tutoring degree from there or something, but he was really upset that I had gone and done this thing that he told me I couldn't do. And it's such an interesting thing. It's like, why are you upset that I did something you didn't think was possible? You didn't even think this was an option. It's not like I stole your job that you already had and you thought was a good gig.
Yeah.
I invented something that you didn't even think was a possibility. Why would you be upset about that? I didn't take anything away from you. But what I took away was his excuse. He couldn't say to anyone that you couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah, and that's another thing I've realized is people's insecurities, they'll lash out at you because you were willing to take that chance that he didn't. And so now he sees that it was possible, and he's really probably just kicking himself. But instead of just accepting that, he's going to lash out because that's what he knows to do. It's not the right way, but I've seen that before. People do that.
What a weird thing to think about that. Like you will try to take someone down who has done nothing to you just to save your own opinion of yourself.
Oh yeah, I've done that, yeah.
Why not just say, hey, maybe I was wrong, but I'm happy with where I am. Apparently this is a thing if you do it right. No sweat off my back. He's got a PhD in education.
Yeah.
He's got a faculty position at UC Berkeley. Why does he care about Matt Todd doing some tutoring? It just shouldn't bother him at all. But yeah, it was that thing. You, like you said, you threaten their own insecurities. You wave their insecurities back in their face.
Yeah. And it's not even on you, it's them. They're fighting with themselves.
Right.
And they're just going to lash out. And yeah, and I've seen that with business partners. And
you work in your family business, right?
Yeah.
And then you came and did this. Did you have anyone that was close to you that was kind of like crapping on it? They're like, you can't make a living that way. That's not a thing.
Yeah, I think, not necessarily like my brother or my father.
Sure.
Not right in the family. I think everyone's kind of skeptical, but they're like, oh, they want to support it. But yeah, there's no one sees a future type thing. But yeah, people doubt it. But again, that's where I use the negative vibes as motivation for me. And once I did that, I just found a lot of peace. And so I've kind of learned throughout life is what are ways that you can gain peace through things. Well, one thing is if you make a mistake, if you own it, you get peace by just owning it instead of trying to sit there and, in a sense, wrestle around trying to justify it. That's where the anxiety and stress will create. But if you just go, you know what, I'm going to own it. I messed up. I'm sorry. Or that won't happen again. It takes the power out of that scenario. And a lot of people just want to get stuck in that scenario and fixated because some people just like drama and they crave it. And maybe it's something they've developed through a lifetime. And that's another thing just to be aware of is making sure you're not around the people that like to live and stew in drama because that's exhausting to be around. So it's just kind of, again, putting your flags up, lines in the sand of what is this person's real intentions? Are they really trying to motivate you? Or are they going to try to bring you down because they're not happy where they're at?
How do you tell the difference in people, though? Because it seems so impossible to understand someone's true intentions before you're like, if you meet somebody and you keep them at arm's length and they're like an acquaintance, you'll never know their true intentions. You don't care because they're at arm's length. Mm-hmm. To really find out whether you made a good call or not, you have to let them in the walls. You got to let them in. Yeah. And then you find out like in a year or two after you kind of like take an appraisal of your life. You're like, was that a good call?
And sometimes that's what it takes. I was saying that for a few years. I was like, I would date someone, and it's like you don't really get to see the full person until about a year to year and a half. And it's frustrating because you are investing a year to a year and a half. And then you see the full picture. And so I've experienced that. But yeah, you do. You got to kind of let people in to understand the real mindset. And so that's just something I've seen and dealt with enough times. And I think that's why when people get older, their circle of friends is smaller and smaller because they've been burned a few times. And they're like, well, I know this person has my back. And so, but I would like to caution people towards that too is you don't want to become too close-minded. I think that's when we stop growing. Right. And so you still got to let other people in because I just look at you're still learning. Even if it didn't go the way you wanted it to, relationship-wise or business-wise, you still learn from it. And so that's where I try to keep an open mind because my nature from the before is oh, you burned a bridge with me, I'm done with you. But then I worked with mentors and they said, no, you need to kind of loosen up, take a step back. That's not the best way of going about things. And so I had to work on that myself. Was, all right, if I have a friend that kind of burns me once or twice, I'm going to talk about it with that person instead of just cutting them off. Because through doing that, it's not comfortable, but by doing that, and I have done that, where like I had a friend that we just quit talking for about a year, and then we came back and we both just talked it out, and he's like, yeah, I was just dealing with some stuff in my life then, but like he's still cool with me, but because of what he even said, what was going on in my life, I just couldn't like be friends with you at the time. But it wasn't you, it was me. And so it's like, that's the other thing you have to realize is sometimes we don't know what everyone's battles are going on in their lives. And so I try to take that with a grain of salt too, is I need to be a little more sensitive to other people. I don't know what's going on in their life. They could have a family member dying of cancer right now, and I don't know that. And so that's I try to be a little more sensitive to that, even in my classes. Sometimes you get a fighter that comes in and they're kind of being almost rude or second guessing things, and you go, you know what, that's not on me, that's whatever they're dealing with right now. And so instead of getting frustrated, I'll talk to that person, maybe to the side, depending on if I need to, especially if I get two fighters. Like, big thing is say you change your prices, there's always people don't like change. Like, so that's just the bottom line. People don't like change. You have to develop accepting and adapting to change. And so you just have to stay on top of it. So if I had two people that are starting to, maybe talk trash about pricing or something, I'm going to take those two people out separately and in a sense, I'm taking that toxic person or two out, address it, and then move forward. Same thing. It's kind of like if you own it, it's not a problem. But if I just let it keep going on, then it's a problem that's getting bigger and out of control.
As a small business owner, I have such a great appreciation for people that get cranky about things. One guest I had on who was a realtor, she said they're all the scratchy towel people. And I was like, what's a scratchy towel?
Yeah.
She was like, exactly. If you look at some 5-star hotel, there will always be somebody in the reviews who's giving it a 1 star and saying the towels were scratchy. Oh. And so that was her phrase for that person. But the pricing thing always cracks me up, because look, we're not, if you have Parkinson's, you don't have to join a Rocksteady gym, right? If you're a student in high school or you're a parent of a student, you don't have to hire an SAT tutor, right? And if you do want to hire an SAT tutor, you can't throw a football in Danville without hitting one. Like you'll probably like back into them by accident as you're trying to throw. It's like they're everywhere. Everybody's a tutor because there's a zero entry into it. Right? Like you can go on Craigslist tonight and say like, hey, I'm Daniel, I'm the new SAT tutor, new sheriff in town. But the point is, people get so weird, consumers get so weird over pricing, and it's so interesting to me because why? Like, look, you called me, right? You came to this gym. It's not like I like bait and switch, right? Like I told you let's say it's $100, whatever that means. It's $100. It was $100 when you were on the phone. It was $100 on the website. It's $100 where you're standing here. Why are you here telling me how I'm not worth $100? And if you don't think I am, that's fine. We don't have to have a conversation at all. It's still $100. And it's so interesting that people find that as a sticking point. And I think at the core of it, people anticipate your unrelenting commitment to have them as a client. So they're like, I can criticize the $100 and he will bend because he needs me to come in here. Instead of saying, hey, look, if you don't like the $100, you don't have to buy this.
Yeah.
Right? You can go. Like, you don't have to be here. I don't understand why we're even having this conversation. If you think I'm worth $50, that's fine. But like, I'm charging $100. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, and I dealt with that once with a guy at my Albany location where he was just kind of relentless. I mean, being a part of PD Active, like I'm on their website and stuff. So he was frustrated. I had to change my drop-in rates like the new year. and he was always doing drop in. And so he says, like, in the gym, he's like, well, I'm going to report you to PD Active. And I'm like, I said, that's great, but I said, this is my business, so that doesn't matter. And I said, you can go talk to PD Active. Like, that's not a threat to me. And so I had a follow-up conversation with him on the phone, and I just told him, I said, look, I'm doing this to be of service to the Parkinson's community. I love what I'm doing. And I said, and part of his deal was, well, I do lots of things. I do rowing, I do this, I do that. I said, those are all good things. I said, so if you think my rates are out of your range, and it wasn't for financial reasons, because I work with people that just can't afford. That's not my deal, because that's not what my thing's not about making money. It's about helping people. So I've adjusted prices to help people that can't afford it, and that's not a deal. But when I know someone can afford it, and they just want to, in a sense, I always tell people they just want to win.
Right.
That's all it is. They just want to know
today that they want to win.
Yeah, they want to know, I got him to lower his price. And it's just, and you got to be careful. There's a line to it, but there's certain personalities where it's going to be toxic. It'll be toxic for my business, for the program, if I go down to whatever he wanted, because what's he going to do? He's going to go talk to everyone and say, well, I only have to pay this. And then that's a big problem. So that's where, in that scenario, it was, hey, whatever you do it with forced intense exercise, because that's what slows down, through the research, that's what slows the disease down, Parkinson's. And so I just told him that, and I left it on a happy note, because he could tell, even though he was frustrated I didn't give him what he wanted, I still wanted to help him.
Right.
So it's like, how mad could you be at me? I'm still saying, do these things, this will help you.
Right.
So it's just kind of like, that's how I dealt with that. I mean, that's one out of, say, 100 plus people.
Did he come back?
He didn't.
He did not.
No.
He found
and I was okay with that.
Right.
Yeah, because it's like, I don't want that one toxic fighter to disrupt my program.
I had this client way up in the Berkeley Hills. This was years and years ago. Probably like 2007, 2008, 2009, sometime around there. So I have this kid and work with the kid. The dad loves me with his son. His son's name was Nick. Okay. I'm working with Nick, and the mom is happy, the dad is happy. The dad is so happy to see me every time I roll up. It's no problem. They call me for the daughter the next year, and my rates had gone up $10.
Yeah.
That was it. And again, that's not an egregious increase. It was like, it went up $10, and that was it for the session. And so I show up and start working with the daughter. And all of a sudden, I send them an invoice, I email them an invoice, and the dad's like, "This is more than we've ever paid anyone ever." It's like, yeah, you pretty much paid me this last year. I just went up $10 for the session, and it's in-home tutoring, and it's 90 minutes, and like it takes me 2 hours round trip and everything.
Yeah.
So like it's essentially like a $5 an hour increase, and that's it. And by the way, there are lots of different SAT tutors, so you don't have to hire them. They kept coming. They kept having me back. The dad would not stop giving me a hard time about it, and I was like, why are we doing this? You're calling me. I keep coming back. You could call somebody else. Why are we having this conversation? And I ended up just having to terminate the relationship with the client, because it was like, you're obviously not happy I'm here. Your wife and daughter, and I guess you go along with it when I'm not here because you guys keep calling me, and then whenever I show up, you're like upset at me. So what are we doing, right? I don't know. I think it's definitely what you were saying. It's like, people just have their struggles. One year that guy was super cool with me. The next year he couldn't, there was something going on in his life. He just couldn't handle it.
And again, getting rid of that client gave you peace.
Right.
And not dealing with that constant stress of just, you don't need it. It's like and that was another thing I really paid attention to, is everything's a growing process, especially when you're starting a business. You have to learn what is taking up too much of your time. Did you give yourself enough lead time to get to the class, to get set up, to teach? And so that's kind of what I've been really working on, is I always take a step back and go, what can I improve? What was just a waste of my time stress-wise? If it's a client, if it's my scheduling, coaches, whatever, so that I don't have that frustration moving forward, because it just eats at you.
Right.
So it's just, again, adapting. You got to constantly adapt.
How much does showing up to your job and working with people that have Parkinson's, they're generally older, and they're struggling to these basic movements and keep it going, how much does that just in itself change your own mentality of your life? on a daily basis?
Yeah, I would say for me, it gives me a sense of it's right in my face. You need to have a sense of urgency with life. You need to go after what you enjoy doing, because I've worked with so many people that, in a sense, they're in their golden years, very successful careers, have all the money they could ever need, and then they get Parkinson's. So that's kind of my mentality: is go after everything you're passionate about as best you can, because who knows, I could get Parkinson's, or I could get some disease that completely changes how I live my life. So it just really gave me a sense of urgency to live life to the fullest and not take things for granted. Because I think that's a lot of the time when people get diagnosed, it's just like they didn't realize all the things they took for granted until they're already 50% less dopamine, and now they're dealing with this. And they have to learn about Parkinson's, and it's a lot to take in. And that's the other reason why, for me, I make a point to have the books. When you do an assessment, you're walking away with boxing gloves. You're walking away with the John Vine Parkinson's Primer book, because I want you to go away with something that you could be looking at, reading, learning from. Because I've just had too many people come to me and say, I went to my doctor, I didn't get any information. I'm like, well, that's a disservice. And so I want people to have the knowledge, because if you're constantly working on yourself, bettering yourself, if you have Parkinson's, you don't have time to sit around and pout about it.
Right.
And so that's what I've seen. I've got fighters doing boxing 3 days a week, doing yoga, doing Pilates, doing a dance class, but they're doing things that they enjoy, and that's why they're consistent. And they're not sitting around pouting about Parkinson's. They're living awesome lives. And some of the people I've heard not necessarily my program, but in part Rocksteady's in a whole, they said, this changed my life. I was never active my whole life. So now they have this different lifestyle, and now they're doing things they never did, because they never focused on their health and fitness.
Right.
So that's just the other aspect. But again, coming back, it's the urgency of going after life and not just kind of getting through life. It's a mentality, a mindset you have to have. It's just you have to change it. I've heard the statistics, 74% of people don't like the jobs they do. That blows my mind. I'm so thankful I am now not in that 74%. I had been in that for years. So I have a taste of both sides. And I really needed to have that bad taste in myself to motivate me to not be in that 74% anymore.
Right.
Because that's so high. I mean, that's like you're driving on the freeway. So many people are miserable. It's like, that's the last thing I want to be. I want to just love life. Be able to be present with my kids, my girlfriend, because that's what's important. I've seen so many people that have the money. I mean, you could watch The Real Housewives. Any of those. Look at all those people.
You don't watch that stuff,
no,
do you?
But I'm saying that's an example of someone that's got the money, but are they happy? Not necessarily. They just have money to distract them for whatever they don't want to face.
You know what's interesting about the money argument? I've been thinking about this a lot recently. If you go on, like, let's say you go on Nextdoor, okay, and I don't go on frequently at all, but somebody, if you ever go on, you always get these little snips about, like, these kids are out there, throwing eggs. Like, there are people that get on and somebody had egged the neighborhood. Maybe not even their house. They know it's happening. And then you get all these comments on it about, like, well, eggs are expensive. I bet if they didn't live in Danville, they'd have a different perspective on buying eggs. And underlying that argument is that, hey, the people here are somehow less than because they have some dough, right? And, like, the people that live in, say, Concord, where I grew up, know something that the people here don't, because they don't have as much money. And it's such an odd thing. It's like we always poo-poo on the person, like the Real Housewife, who's loaded, but she's miserable. And I don't think people who are well-heeled financially have a copyright on misery. Like, you have plenty. But that's one of the things that I feel like people fall back on. It's almost like they have money, therefore they're not happy. That's kind of, it's like they worked so hard to get that money and they're not happy. It's like, how do you know they wouldn't have just been not happy being broke?
Well,
like,
that's
maybe
true
they're
too.
just unhappy people who happen to have a good skill at this thing that made them money, but they're still unhappy. And we always, again, you see these classic examples of people who chased money. They're overweight, they're miserable in their careers, whatever, but they chased this money. But maybe that's just who they are. Maybe they're just miserable old saps. Like that.
That's a good point. That's true. I mean, there's advantages to having the money.
There are.
Because you can experience things that you couldn't if you didn't have the money. I mean, that's kind of one of my goals, is exposing my kids to as many different things so they can figure out through their decisiveness what they enjoy.
Like what? What do you do?
I mean, just for example,
like music or something,
martial arts, skiing, snowboarding, just exposing them, wakeboarding, just different activities.
Bro, what kind of trust fund do you have? You take your kids skiing?
No,
I would love.
No, I'm just saying that's something that for me as a kid, I didn't
hundreds
get to
of
do.
dollars. But there's like my dad. Okay, so my dad was awesome. Same thing. He figured out a way to get us to go skiing. So like one year we went skiing a bunch, and my stepmom was from Montana, and so we went to Montana a couple times to see her family when we went skiing. But the lift tickets were like $10, right? And then when I was growing up here, in like the mid 90s, lift tickets in Tahoe weren't crazy. It wasn't gonna like break the bank. You could take. There were 5 of us, my dad, his wife, and then me and my brother, sister. You could take us skiing. It wasn't going to kill us. And, it cost money. My dad had to work, but it wasn't crazy. Now, it's easy, like $150 a person.
Yeah.
And so to take me, my wife, and my 3 boys at $150 a person, $1,000 when you factor in everything else just for one day, like, are you nuts? So I just make people talk about taking their kids up to the snow, and it's like, dude, you must be slaying it somehow, because it seems like one of those sports that's becoming out of reach for the average person. I know there are more economical ways to do it. I'm just giving you a hard time, but
that's true.
It's
I mean,
ridiculous.
Because that's what I think right away is, well, I'm sure there's some Groupon or something that you can navigate around.
Yeah.
It. But I mean, that's kind of what I just felt like my daughter does horseback riding, and I think it's awesome. The first time I rode a horse was like a month ago. So, that's like, so it's like I'm thankful that she's doing that. But yeah, I'd like to just be able to expose them to things they're interested in.
Right.
It doesn't have to be all the things stated, but yeah, definitely just exposing your kids to different things. I think part of it why I have that mindset is because, like, even with martial arts, there's a lot of people that just hearing the word martial arts causes them anxiety, or that's aggressive. Or I don't want my kids fighting.
You're a violent man.
Yeah.
Look at you. You have tattoos. You're violent.
Exactly. And so that was, for me, that was my mindset, is I want people to understand that martial arts, jiu-jitsu, boxing, it's a sport, but it's a way of living. It's not a bad thing if you get some structure, some discipline, some, accountability. So all those things are actually what really are the core of martial arts. And so I want to take kind of one of my goals is to expose people to martial arts where they're not afraid of trying it because of the aggression or what they think because of, say, UFC, like that's the only reality of it. No, you get to learn about people's cultures. You get to learn history, and that's what I love. To me, it's a beautiful thing. If you watch martial arts, it's beautiful to watch. People doing sticks. Like, that's a really cool thing, and I just gravitate towards things like that. It's just a different way of dancing.
Right. The thing with martial arts that I think is, and specifically with jiu-jitsu, because I don't have experience with other martial arts, but I know in jiu-jitsu, it's so impossible when you start. Okay. The difficulty, I think, with a lot of pursuits that people have, and things that we expose our kids to, is they're not hard enough. And I know that sounds very odd, right? But what I'm saying is, you don't remember learning how to walk. But if you remember learning how to walk, if you could, you would theoretically be so empowered just by the memory of, like, I used to not even be able to roll over, and then I learned how to roll over, and then I learned how to crawl, and then I went from being on all fours to standing upright and running. Now, if you could remember doing that, your capacity to believe in yourself and push through difficulty would be unparalleled. It would be like, I can do anything. I used to not be able to roll over, and now I can run down the street and catch a Frisbee. Okay? Yes. But we don't remember that. And so, say you're in math. Well, the progress through math, you're kindergarten, first grade, second grade, it's very slow, and you don't get a lot of when you count 1 to 50, right? Like, it's not that big, or like you can add 8 and 7. You're not like Oh my God, I did. And I mean, a couple little excitement things, but it's just kind of what you do as a kid. You just kind of go to school and you learn these things and you move on with your life. But jujitsu is literally like not being able to walk.
Mm-hmm.
You get onto the mat, and even as a grown adult, you have zero capacity to do the things that people are asking you to do. You don't have the fine motor skills. You don't have balance. You don't have the intellectual capacity. It's like you're flat on your back. You can't do anything about it. And you also have the great fortune, if you're in a great place, to roll with somebody, to train with somebody who has all of these things. If you train with a black belt, and it takes decades, sometimes decades, to get your black belt in jiu-jitsu, it's not like other traditional martial arts. If you train with somebody and you realize how good they really are, then you're like, oh my God, you're running down the street catching a frisbee, and I can't even crawl yet. And as you go through the progression, you start to believe in yourself more. You start to believe in your capacity to learn, your capacity to overcome. And it's really important, and you can see it. I remember it's like the first time I tapped somebody, the first time I submitted something, I was a white belt. I'm like, oh my God, it worked! Yeah. Because I remember just getting manhandled, and you couldn't do it. And then you see these things work, and you see yourself getting better. And then there's a belt system that keeps you going. You keep getting excited about because you get these distinct check marks that you're going through. That, to me, that's the thing that martial arts offers.
Yeah.
It's so unique because, again, in jiu-jitsu in particular, it is so hard. It is so impossible. It's unfathomable because it's like a language you've never heard, and you have no ability to comprehend any of it, and then you start going down that path. That, to me, is one of the big reasons why I really want my sons to keep in it. Mm-hmm. And like you're saying, people look at it, oh, you do martial arts, like it must be this violent thing. It's like, no, it's a spiritual practice to me. It's a reminder of what I can do and that I can improve and that I can overcome problems, that I'm not this static character kind of withering away.
Yes.
I've never been in a fight in my life, and I don't plan on it. But jiu-jitsu helps me in so many other ways. I think it's such a disservice that people just write it off because it's considered, like you're saying, you say martial arts, they're like, oh no.
Oh yeah, I was in a sense like the black sheep in my family. No one else had done any martial arts, and I'd come home I went to Palm Springs. My main instructor is Manoy. We refer to him as Manoy. It's like older brother in the Philippines, per that dialect, because there's lots of dialects.
Do you do Muay Thai?
No, it's Pangamuit. That's actually what my tattoo is. And it's Filipino martial arts, so it would be like a Kali or an Arnis, but Pangamuit is Felix Pascua's lineage.
Okay.
And so that, I had done about 10 different martial arts in the Bay Area. And what gravitated me to Manoy or Felix was humble leadership, extremely high skilled, but he had the ability to teach at all levels, which is hard to do for some people that are really high skilled, but also humble. And that was the difference. Was he told my trainer, so I had a trainer, Pete, that was under Manoy, and they are both older. I trained, he was like 50 when I started working with Pete, and Manoy is a similar age. And he said, take Dan all over the Bay Area, have him work in all different martial arts so that when he works with me, he'll see the difference. And so that's what I did for a few years. I just was working with Pete, and that was kind of when we were talking about the repetition of things. Was I was in my early 20s going, does this even work? But I know I need to do it. So it's like I was interested but frustrated at the same time. So it's like I was training 6 days a week. Like I'd go to work and then I'd go train in Oakland or Union City or whatever in the Bay Area. On the weekend, it was like I would do seminars. And it's just, I'd want to encourage people, even though you might be frustrated in some path you're going down, it pays off later. And you just have to keep going through the motions. And that was my experience. Was when I took a step back for 6 months from it, just going through the academy or whatnot, things started making more sense. It's like sometimes you got to step away from the jiu-jitsu or the martial arts so your brain can digest everything, and then you can come back better with a clearer head. And so that was another blessing to have that experience. Was, oh my God, once I took a step back from 6 days a week and breathe and just do other things, it took me to different levels, and there's so much value in that.
Yeah, I think the balance is a really, I know it was for me, it was a really hard thing because I started training in my 20s. And I think the way that we're really, traditionally, I think athletes, specifically male athletes, I can't speak to how female athletes are trained, but my experience was always that, hey, we're going to beat you down and you'll build back up naturally. Right. So the whole beat down, it's like we were talking about, you're comfortable being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. That was always a part of my athletic experience. There was no room for, hey, let's not hate ourselves through this whole practice. It was like, no, you're going to hate yourself. And then, you'll get better because I don't know what that last part was for my coaches, but you'll hate yourself and then somehow there will be a jump to getting better. And just speaking with a friend recently about Peloton has become very, very popular, right? The videos running or cycling or doing whatever. But one of the instructors that I think it was actually my wife I was talking to, she said that he's great because the emphasis is never on hurting yourself when you're running. The emphasis is never on going so hard you're miserable. The emphasis is on going hard enough that you're working, but you're still enjoying the process.
Yeah.
And I didn't get that. I read Born to Run years ago. I was a huge fan of the book, and I started running based on that. I hate running, and I hated running at the time. I was like, this is terrible, but I'm going to give it a shot. And one of the big notes was you should be running because you enjoy it, because this is a happy thing. And if that means you go slower, then go slower. Mm-hmm. Who cares? But my natural volume was go up to the point where you're miserable, but you think you can sustain it for like 30 or 40 minutes. And once you let go of that, all of a sudden you're running for like 1 or 2 hours. You're not even running that slow anymore. You're just running, but the MO is no longer run for the pain. It's run for the enjoyment. And you got to push through certain things. But yeah, it's just it's taking that step back and finding balance in the experience that allows you to go like, oh, that's it. You don't, and the other big thing he emphasized, kind of like what you were saying, is I got a running coach, and he's like, you don't run hard every day. He's like, you have one hard day a week. He's like, Friday is going to be your day. You'll do like a 2.5 hour run, but other than that, like you'll have a 45-minute run. You'll have, short run. You'll have squats. We'll do a bunch of squats and lunges. You do those in your house, and then you'll have one hard. And it was infuriating. It was like, why does this work? Because of course it worked, and I was mad that like for so many years
you could do less and have better results.
Yes. Yeah. What kind of irony is that in the world? Like that's not what they tell you growing up. Yeah. They're like, if you want more, you got to do more. And this guy's like, hey, do less, son, and you'll be happier. And he was right. I was so mad about it.
Yeah, it takes. I learned that myself through the working out and stuff. Was, you do exactly what you said, and then you take a step back and you realize, oh, now that I'm stepping back, I'm letting my body recover, which is something that just needs to be more emphasized in the health and fitness. Is recovery is just as important. And
right.
People just lack that because they almost think it's like counterproductive. Like, oh, this is getting a massage. That's a waste of my time. I should be going harder at the gym. But no, through all my experiences, the more you do that and the more you do less, your body functions better. The cortisol, everything. It's just there's a balance.
Right.
And your body needs that, and it just takes the time and the willingness to try to take a step back to do it, because it's hard. People are addicted to working out. Right. With CrossFit, like whenever one of my friends does CrossFit, I go, hey, just make sure you take some days off. And then I've had people that I told that to, and then a couple months later, oh, I have a knee problem now. It's like, well, did you ever take days off? Well, no, but I knew what I was doing. It's like, all right, well, whatever. It's like you just kind of let them figure it out.
Right. There's a certain level of breakdown that no matter what, like if you take sandpaper and rub it on your hand, you have to imagine that's kind of the type of workout. You can know what you're doing. You can be real tough, but at some point, you're going to rub that sandpaper through the palm of your hand. And that's the way it goes. Like you're damaging yourself, and God bless it. I love doing it. You love doing it. We like stressing ourselves. But you're kidding yourself if you think just because you know what you're doing, your ligaments and your muscles and everything else will recover at the pace you would like them to. Yeah. Because they don't care what you want.
No, I always say if you don't take a break, your body will make you take a break. It'll get injured, and then you have to rest.
Right. You're going to have to sit down now, son. Yeah, same thing when you get sick, right? Like you could be pushing hard. Another rowing coach of mine would always, he'd make it through the season, make it to the end, like win the national championship, fly home from New Jersey, and within a day he was laid out for a week. And it was, he kind of realized later in life, and he was like, is essentially my body was hanging on just until the point when it knew it didn't have to hang on anymore.
Yeah.
And then it was like, look, baby, you're going to sit down right now and not move for about a week. And he would, like have the chills and feel like crap and then, recover after sleeping for like 12 hours a day.
Yeah. And I kind of had that. Luckily, I had that insight when I went and did like training in Palm Springs for like a weekend, like intense training. You come back real sore. One thing I did do is like, well, I needed the fresh blood pumping. So I did like a light jog on a treadmill, and then I went and got a sports massage. And so my buddy that came with me did the exact same training. He didn't do anything, and he got a fever. So it's like, it's kind of how you kind of like decelerate and get your body to like get the fresh blood, but still get the massage, hydrate a lot too. That was the other thing, was you got to drink a ton of water when you do something intense, because all that acid's build up. You need to flush it out.
Right. So when you're dealing with your fighters, your Parkinson fighters, and they've lived a life completely away from an active, healthy balance, do you have to essentially like educate them as if you were talking to a complete newbie, like somebody who's completely never done this and they're like 15? It's like, well, how much water did you drink today? They're like, water? What does that have to do with anything?
Yeah, I definitely talk about making sure they drink enough water. I mean, there's so many varieties. Their medication, the food they intake, eating protein with their medication can mess up the medication. So there's just a lot of elements that they have to think through. But I always tell people, give yourself a couple months to see the changes. Because everyone thinks it's 2 weeks, and it's not. It takes your body time to adapt, especially if you're super sedentary your whole life. So it's just giving them basics and goals that aren't like ridiculously out of range, because I don't want to give someone so worked up they're like, oh, I can't do this and never come back. So it's really just be easy on yourself. I say we're always hardest on ourselves. I said you got to keep in mind, people in this class have been doing this with me for over 3 years. So they've had 3 years to work on themselves. You're at day 1. So you got to remember that. You're not going to be able to keep up with everybody here. And so I just let them know that. Like, take it easy, especially, because people get frustrated. I was able to fully extend my left arm 5 years ago. Why can't I now? Well, we just got to work on it. You just got to go at it in stages. You got to be thankful for the small goals. That's the thing. A lot of people forget about all the small steps that they've overcome, and you got to remind them of that.
Right.
Because that's so important, because we're so hard on ourselves.
Yeah, but I mean, I could not imagine having that be part of my journey and being able to apply with grace and compassion, apply the things I know now. I would be livid. I'd be an absolute wreck, and to see them fighting through that graciously and with patience it's really amazing. It's one of those things where every time I see him, I'm like, damn, man. And here I get, I'm training with my buddies, and I'm going to run home, and I'm exhausted. And it's like, God, man, I can't imagine how hard that must be. And here I do what I consider hard. I feel kind of pathetic when they come in.
Well, it's intoxicating. It's so motivating to be around. I always tell them, you guys are the 1% of the Parkinson's community. I mean, there's over 1,500 people on the mailing list of PD Active. At my Albany location, there's, say, 60 fighters before COVID. So, there's that percentage out of 1,500. So that's what's also intoxicating, is these are the go-getters.
Right.
I'm not saying other programs, they're not go-getting it, but these are really go-getter folks that are just, they're going to go after it. And I know they've gone through the grief steps. I think if I were to get diagnosed with Parkinson's, I'm going to go through the denial, anger, bargain, sorrow, acceptance.
Sure.
But then once they come through that, they're on fire.
Right.
And that's the difference, is they have all each other dealing with the same disease. They motivate the heck out of each other, and you create this whole new group of friends. and the camaraderie is huge. I think we're all tribal. I think that's why jiu-jitsu is so successful. Even CrossFit, the Rocksteady. We have our tribe, and we motivate each other. And that happens all the time. You have fighters come in that are having bad days. They'll tell me, my back's bothering me. I'm just going to take it easy. I'm like, perfect. That's what I want. See how you're feeling at the end of class. Because once you get the blood pumping and everything, I mean, literally 90% of the time, that fighter will come back to me and say, oh, my back's feeling great now. But it's they have the mindset to know I need to at least show up. And I even tell some people that if I say just show up, even if you only stay for 20 minutes, there's value in you coming to the class, seeing your fellow fighters, and then if you got to leave early, leave early. A big thing too is when fighters go on vacation, they lose. If they go on a 2-week vacation, they're coming back not the same level they were 2 weeks ago. And so I had a fighter in in Albany. He knew that. But that was his mindset was, hey, I know I'm going to come back. He went on like a 5-week vacation, and he came back and he goes, I know I can't stay the whole class. I'm going to shoot for 45 minutes today. And he knew that. And then the next class, hey, I'm still at 45. All right, great. So within a couple weeks, he's staying the whole class again. But he just knew I have to take it in increments because I know every time I step away from the boxing, I lose something.
Right.
And so it's just that mentality of you just got to take a step back, go easy on yourself, and it comes back. It just takes time.
Right. That's a win, though.
It is
That's
a win.
a win.
Well, it's just the fact that he has that mindset.
Yeah.
You know,
that's a huge win.
And to be able to share that mindset with other fighters that feel that way. Well, now I can tell you, this fighter did that. Mm-hmm. It is possible. So it's a beautiful thing. I mean, I never thought I'd use the word beautiful so much.
It's a beautiful thing.
But it's so true. And when you're talking about someone rolling over, I'm working with a fighter in Danville just one-on-one about once every 3 weeks at his house. And again, a go-getter. He's got like a doctorate in engineering, very successful, teaches me about printing presses and things I have no idea about. But I love that. And we've been working at his house the last few months, and now when I started with him at his house, he couldn't get onto his back without a lot of effort. I went over there a week ago, and he is on the ground showing me, look what I can do, rolling back and forth, no problem. Like, that's beautiful. Because he took the time to work with me. We were going every 2 weeks, and then we went down to like once every 3 weeks. But he sees it. He saw where he was, and he sees, now I can roll over on my own. And it's like, that's the empowerment. That's the freedom I like to see people have.
That's learning how to walk.
It is. He's learning how to get up and down safely. Both his knees are replaced. It's more of a psychological deal of I don't want to hurt my replaced knee. Like, I totally understand that. And so that's been a big thing is, I've taken a step back and I've done a lot more chair exercises with getting up and down on one knee, making sure you're standing wide enough where you have a stable base, you're bending your knees, just trying to really get the muscle memory through repetition. It's basic things, but if you do it in the moment under stress, your body will default to the muscle memory. And so that's what's really cool seeing is if they consistently do it, they see it on their own. And so I've said it in previous podcasts is I don't sell this program, my fighters do. Right. And when we're in the gym, the fighters surround the new person say, this is what has improved since I've been here. And that's what's so neat. It's that. And just all the stuff, when people ask me, what do you enjoy the most? It's them telling me what I'm doing that I wasn't doing before I started the boxing. I stopped traveling. I'm traveling. I went to Central Park. I'm playing tennis. I haven't played tennis in 10 years. Or I'm shooting hoops. I haven't done that in 15 years. And it's like, those are all things people have told me. And it's like, that's what it's about. I want you to live the best quality of life possible, even though you got dealt the hand of Parkinson's disease. And to get that feedback, that's worth it. I'd rather have that than a big bank account because that's really, I think, it's just the healthiest thing for me, for my personality.
Yeah. And well, I think it would probably be healthy for everyone.
Yeah, and it's how can you help someone?
Yeah, right. And just see that really. I was talking to a student just the other day about a bag he made for homeless people. He's like, look, you want to give them food, and you see them in a stoplight, but then you don't necessarily want to give them. You don't want to give them money because you don't want them to use drugs or alcohol and things, and it's going back and forth. And and it really just struck me. His entire essay was about how he came up with this bag that had like chapstick and some other stuff in it, like real essentials and some food, right? But other things besides, like a bag of goldfish. What else could you give somebody that they might really need? And it's really clear that it's not always self-evident how to help people. And I think in general, people are most happy when they find a way that they believe in, that they do feel and see is helping. And it's a beautiful thing. It's wonderful that you found that. It's wonderful that you found it for your fighters, but for yourself too.
Yeah, it's been a big blessing. I mean, I go to coach conferences where all the Rocksteady coaches come together. We did it in Arizona last September, and coaches say, even our head coach Christy Rose-Fomer said, like, this saved my life. And it's like, that's the reality, is this helps the coaches just as much as the fighters. This is giving us a clear head, a mindset, a purpose, and it's a blessing for us. So, and I don't ever take it for granted. Being of service, I always say it's a gift. I would never want that taken away from me. So whenever anything gets hard, I just go down to my basics again. What do I love doing? I love working with the fighters, seeing their improvements, getting their feedback. So when I had split from my partner, that was my default in that moment. It was, I just love doing this. Let's see what happens. And so that was that scary kind of breaking point of, I could have just given up and just said, all right, let's go work full time, my family business, take that safe route, but I would have been miserable.
Right.
And I knew that psychologically I would go downhill, even if financially I was more stable.
Sure.
I wouldn't be able to sleep at night.
Right. Well, and again, you wouldn't want to get up in the morning even if you could.
No. Oh. And you'd want to find ways that, why can I call in sick today? Play those games where it's like, it's just a waste of time.
Yeah. Look, man, it's been an hour and a half. I gotta let you go. Time flies, right? It's a good time. Listen, I'm gonna post. Please, everybody, hang around. Daniel gave me a little video that I really want to post. I watched it. I really liked it. I'll post it right as soon as I stop this videoing. But thank you for what you do. I will put all of your website and everything. How can people find you guys?
Sure, yeah, please. The website is rocksteadyboxinggba.com. The GBA is for Greater Bay Area. You can contact me through there. I'm running online classes. Luckily, Mike at Danville Jiu-Jitsu got me in touch with you, and I'm really thankful for that. And so anyone all over the country or world could participate in the online classes. So if anyone has a spouse, friend, family member with Parkinson's, have them try out my class. I do all my communication through email. You can give me a call on the website as well. I would love to speak to a couple books real quick.
Yes, please. Yeah. Just awesome resources that people can hit right away.
Yeah. The one I always give is, and I'm sure we'll just take a picture of this later, but the Parkinson's Primer by John Vine. He is a retired lawyer that got diagnosed in 2008 with Parkinson's. Wrote a great book. This is good for people with Parkinson's disease as well as family members.
Wonderful.
It even has 10 questions in there to ask your doctor, which is awesome. If you just got diagnosed, this is very valuable. Great. So I like to give that out. I just went on Karl Sterling's podcast, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's
I'll put it in the notes. It's okay.
But Karl Sterling's A Parkinson's Regeneration Training. That's another good book. There's about 10 doctors in here that are references, as well as about 12 fighters with Parkinson's disease giving their stories. His podcast is Extraordinary Experts Podcast. And then another one, again, John Argue's been a friend and mentor of mine. He's worked in the Parkinson's community over 30 years. He's on the board at PD Active. Parkinson's Disease, The Art of Moving is another book I would recommend. I have nothing but great things to say about John Argue. And he even said to the board at PD Active, he said, Rocksteady Boxing is the gold standard for fighting Parkinson's. So I really took that as a big honor. But again, I want to thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you for making the time.
I'm hoping eventually I'll come back again and we can have another great conversation.
You got it, man. Absolutely. Thank you again. Thank you for the work you do.
Absolutely.
It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
I feel both the psychological and the physical benefits. I've always been active, but this is a focused kind of activity that I really appreciate.
The mission of Rocksteady Boxing is to fight back against Parkinson's disease through non-contact boxing.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so let's be louder with
The
our
goal with
voices
Rocksteady Boxing through the research is the forced intense exercise is what slows down the progression of Parkinson's disease.
I do this, and it gives me the strength to do a lot of other physical activity at the same time, which is really good for me.
I feel better physically, but I feel even better mentally. Less anxiety. The physical is important, but to me, right now, the mental, I feel so much better mentally.
I'm Dana. I would say that core strength has improved a lot, endurance. I think also that just the support of the group has been a very important thing.
Parkinson's disease is a degenerate neurological disease. It affects the movement of the body, things, speech, shuffling of the feet, stiffness, rigidity. It affects a lot physically.
The wonderful thing about Rocksteady Boxing is indeed a community.
The key element is the camaraderie with the fighters. They love seeing each other. I've had fighters tell me this is a coming out party for me. Before I came here, I didn't tell anyone I had Parkinson's. Now I feel relieved, and I'm okay with letting people know I have Parkinson's disease.
One, two, three.